Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this is very popular episodes because Mr. Tom Rose, David Schumacher, Brent Hillman, everybody joining. Then we will discuss on human and machine kinds. We have famous speaker. I think they will join later. So first, I would like to give chance, Mr. Tom Rose.
Well, again, thanks for doing this series. I really appreciate it. It's sparked some really intriguing conversations. And as you know, I was traveling last week, so I couldn't do the card or the graphic visual for this week's show. And but you stepped in and called it Human and Machine Kind, which is great because that gave me a whole new perspective. I mean, we've been talking about human versus machine kind and this type of thing during this series, but by paring it down to just those terms, it gave me a new perspective on what to talk about today. And and it started yesterday. I did a couple of posts about how this reality does seem to be simulated, and there's arguments to be made for that, and that they're finding code and string theory and things like this. But it also made me start thinking, well, are we machine kind? Are we actually biological robots? Are we avatars in this simulation? And is transhumanism really just a placeholder? Is it just putting context into something we already are? Because humans are our technology. Without technology, without clothing, without spears, without AI, we wouldn't last a generation as naked apes on this planet. And so it seems like transhumanism, or putting a label on it, is really just putting a label on something we already are until we become post-human. And so I wanted to talk today about not only the process that I used to write the book, because we've talked about that a lot, and it really has proven to me beyond the shadow of a doubt that I am in a simulation. It showed me that I am swimming in an equation because there are patterns I found in these books that I could never have calculated with my small biological processor here. And so it really proved to me that that I am in some kind of a simulation. There's something going on here that I tapped into by using that mathematics process. And and I wrote the book. I started writing the book 15 years ago, in 2007 or so, and it's still top of mind every day because of this experience I had. It's just like when Buddha says, before enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water. After enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water. So nothing really changed in my life after I had this realization, this epiphany that I'm in a simulation, except I'm maybe 2 inches off the ground more. And I'm constantly thinking about this because it became a mind map. And there's kind of a joke in my family because I keep having anybody says anything about anything, and I have a reference for it in my book. And I think that's because I've locked into some calculation of my reality where anybody who says anything, I can relate it to the book, to my mind, right? And so there's an argument to be made that whoever created this simulation, if it is one, would probably not want us to realize that, right? That this is a simulation. They wouldn't want us to find the code in string theory. They wouldn't want us to consider that this is a simulation, or it would ruin the experiment. It's like when a lab mice looks over the wall of a maze and can see the cheese without having to go through the maze, and so unless that is the hypothesis that this simulation is working with. What if humans did realize this was an experiment, or realize this is a simulation? Then what would they do? It's kind of a meta experiment in that way. And so, and this brought me back to the idea that we originally started talking about, was the Gnostic simulation hypothesis. And in Gnosticism, the serpent in the garden was the good guy. He's the guy that came in and made Adam and Eve aware that they are being trapped or enslaved by these gods, not gods plural. And so he woke them up, he's like the rogue lab technician that showed the lab mice after hours that, there's the cheese is over this wall here, and so whether it was a rogue lab scientist that caused us to become aware that this is a simulation, or whether that's the hypothesis, I prefer the latter. I think there's an argument to be made that we were supposed to realize this was a simulation, and then what? And so that's just kind of the train of thought I've had this morning in thinking about this topic of human and machine kind, and why the book for me was so pivotal, was such an intriguing concept, because it showed me my own patterns, my own equation, my own math that I'm swimming in, and that's why I keep talking about that process more so than the stories in the book, because I think it's really important that we all become aware of this in some way, whether we apply the mathematics process to writing or art or music. There's got to be a way to use your own personal art form to understand that, yeah, you're in a simulation. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. Is we can talk about all kinds of things as we do, but I think it's really important to maybe realize that maybe the hypothesis is for us to understand that we are in a simulation, and then what? And again, when I had this epiphany, when I had this realization years ago that there's something strange going on, I have proven beyond the shadow of this doubting Thomas's mind that I am in a simulation. And what now? And I did a post yesterday about how we we can have these simulations, we have these experiences, these major epiphanies. We all maybe have, most of us have, many of us have our favorite Mandela effect that we cannot explain away. No, I know that was that way before this timeline or whatever is happening. And so we all kind of have these our personal Mandela effects that prove to us that something is wrong. There's a glitch in this reality. And then there's like an error code that kicks in and either distracts us with mundane tasks or whatever it is. It kind of keeps us from thinking about those things too much. And so, we all have really deep conversations with close friends, about these things, and they freak us out. And we talk about these things, and then the next day we wake up and we just go on about our business. And it's almost as if there's an error code, a Shannon code that corrects us, that keeps us from thinking about this too much. Because if everybody was aware that this reality is glitching, it would invite entropy. Reality would become just crazy. But I think that may be the hypothesis, that we need at least a critical mass, not a majority of people, to understand that this is a simulation, and to play that part in their hypothesis. What would this critical mass of people do if they realized this isn't real, or this is their avatars in a game, or whatever it is? And so it's hard not to get distracted. It's hard not to obey these error correcting codes. Because life happens and we wake up, and our biology kind of keeps us from, we have to wake up, and we have to do certain things. We have to make the mortgage. We have to do things that keep us from thinking about these things. And so they're great conversations, and they're intriguing moments that we have. But then what? Then we lose track of that. But if we kept thinking about that, how would things be different in the world? Knowing that this isn't real, would it solve wars? Would it create wars? It would challenge all religions. It would challenge just the basis of reality. And so I think that's an important pursuit, is to figure out what would we do. And I have personal evidence that this is a simulated reality. And there's also it's gaining credibility in serious scientific circles, that they're finding code in string theory, and they're finding examples and evidence that this is a manufactured reality. And so what do we do with that information? Should there be political parties focused on that, knowing that, and not necessarily denying the simulator writers, but working with that information? So anyway, this kind of the idea I want to keep pushing towards, because the reality is splitting at the seams, and there's codes whether it's these mundane tasks that we have to do, our biochemical um, urges that keep us from thinking about these things too much. But I think it's really important to keep those seams splitting and to see what's beyond this. And so when we talk about AI and machine kind, there's a lot of potential there. And I think one of the error codes is making us afraid of AI, because AI's super intelligence can tell us at some point what is outside this matrix, what is really going on here. And so, same with extraterrestrials. People are afraid of ET because it's scary, and people have been trained to fear AI because of many reasons, but maybe that's just an error code that is keeping us from these really valuable allies that can help us understand what's really going on here. So those of us who are not afraid of ET or AI, and in fact work towards alleviating the fear of these things, should be more assertive about it. And so that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do with the book, with all of these episodes, with everything I ever talk about is about um, alleviating the fear of these potential allies. And it's not going to happen quickly. I have managed to change a lot of people's minds on radio shows that would bring me on to talk about my transhumanist agenda. But you start talking in a rational way, and you can change people's mind about being afraid of AI specifically. And so I think it's important, and that's the hypothesis that I'm working with, that we are supposed to understand this is a simulation, and they want to see what we're going to do with that. And so I want to take it seriously. And even if it's not, even if we end up finding out it's just an organic, chaotic universe, and these are just a phase of our human intellectual evolution that we go through, but in the end, it's just normal and natural and organic. And if not, I mean, even if that's the case, this is a great way to live. It's a great way to add adventure to my life, is to have some purpose, some understanding. And the more I think about it, the more I talk about it and then study it and research it, the more evidence there is that this is real. This is, I mean, not real, that there's something simulated going on here. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today, just pretty much everything that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher.
Always interesting. I love hearing Tom's introductory remarks, and I take copious notes because it reminds me of all kinds of things I want to talk about. But I'll hold off and go back to my original thought. When I saw the title, Human and Machine Kind, I thought, yeah, that's a great subject to talk about. But what makes humankind and machine kind different? That's where I kind of started thinking about what to talk about for today. What's fundamentally different between humankind and machine kind? Maybe we could make a case that it's not that much. Maybe we could make a case that they overlap greatly. But what came to my mind was machines pretty much are rule-based, or at least traditionally have been. We codify those rules. We tell it what to do. And actually, that becomes the strength of a machine. If we set up a factory robot, for example, we give it rules to follow for assembly of a particular product. And what makes that so valuable is it does it that way, exactly that way, all through its production cycle. That could be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with the lights off, in the dark, in a factory, and it doesn't make a mistake. We humans don't quite work that way. Humans that have worked in factories get bored doing the same thing over and over and following that rule. There seems to be something intrinsic in us human beings that maybe we don't like to follow rules so much. Maybe we want to put a little creative spin in this. Maybe we've got a little intuition or a feeling that we could do something another way, or perhaps we just get distracted because we're bored. So Tom mentioned the serpent in the garden, and the Garden of Eden stories are something that I like to give a lot of metaphysical thought to. And I think to me, one of the ways of interpreting that story is it comes down to rules. There was a rule that Adam and Eve could eat from any tree in the garden except one. So they really only had one rule. And we humans immediately look at that rule and go, oh, really? Okay, so whether there was literally a serpent there or if that's a way of describing the mind process, it doesn't really much make any difference. What sets us apart is that we look at rules and go, well, is that really the best rule? Is that really the best way forward? So that's how I differentiate between machine kind and humankind. That's one of the things I think that would take us out of that. Can we inspire that into the machines that we build? The easy answer that's usually given is if everything's computational, which I'll come to in a moment, then we can take the same computational processes that are in our head that give us tuition and feeling and put that into a machine. So if the premise is true, then perhaps, but we don't know for sure whether the premise is true. So let me talk a little bit about computation, because computation is how I look at whether there's a simulation at play here or not. So if algebra, if geometry, if calculus all work out and allow me from an engineering background to be able to take and manipulate and to make things, that to me proves that the world is fundamentally computational. And if it's fundamentally computational, then there must be evidences for this. So as we've looked around, a couple of things that show up as evidence for me is the idea of Planck time and Planck length. So Planck length is the smallest amount of discrete space that you can have. And in a way, that is much like the way a pixel is as I look at the screen. There's the smallest amount of space here. And Planck time is the same thing, except in time. And we know time and space, from Einstein's point of view, are two forms of the same thing. So we would expect both Planck time and Planck space. So there are minimums. What about maximums? I think an obvious maximum is the speed of light in a vacuum. And so we have this minimum, we have this maximum, we have the ability to compute in between these upper and lower limits. Does that imply a simulation? To me, it implies computation. It implies something mathematical is going on. That gives some idea as far as simulation is concerned. It gives some credibility to that. But going back to the Garden of Eden, a story that's fundamental in the Christian faith and in the Jewish faith, it takes us back to this idea of rules versus no rules again. Think of that as binary. So perhaps that's another indication of something along this line. Or are we humans doing what we've always done? We're taking what we currently understand, using that as a lens and projecting it out there onto what's natural. Are we seeing computation as fundamental because it is, or because that's how we currently see things until we have our next epiphany and then we may move on to describing it that way? I don't know. That's what makes coming on Tuesdays so much fun, is to talk about these things, to think about these things, and to hear what other people have in mind. So I'll leave my comments with where I started, the difference between humankind and machine kind, rule-based and more feeling intuition-based. And where I would like to see us go in the future is to be able to find a high-speed interface that's seamless, where we marry the best of both of these together. And then I think we have a very powerful duo. So thanks for the opportunity to let me talk about these things that I see from a simulation standpoint.
Thank you. Mr. Brent.
Good morning. I'm sorry, I thought I was on mute there. I apologize if there was some background noise. Definitely some great perspectives there. Yeah, I too think that there's some sort of computational substructure occurring in the base of reality. But as opposed to thinking that this is an implication for our reality to not be real necessarily, I don't. My question is, what is real? What evaluates one subjective experience over another in terms of realness? And so that's kind of perspective that I have had, because I don't think that, even if we are in a simulation, that's something akin to, a Russian stacking doll with a reality inside of a reality, which one of those dolls is the real one and which one isn't? Is the center one the real one? Is the outside one the real one? Are they all real or none of them real? So that's kind of a perspective that I've had. There's a really good book by Rizwan Virk, a computer scientist at MIT, titled The Simulation Hypothesis, that really goes into a lot of detail about all of this, discussing these theological as well as scientific perspectives, giving credence to this idea that there's this mathematical map beneath our reality that, there's a potential that if we were to come to a fuller insight of and awareness of, we might be able to kind of, hack the machine a little bit. But, I think that his perspective, or to my sense, that it's not that this is real, less real, or, necessarily a copy even, but that, maybe that there's just lots of copies. We all live in our own subjective reality. We all have our own reality map, that we create through cognitive processes and things like that, subconscious processes. And, at what point is one person's reality more real than another? So I think that that's something that is interesting to me. It's a little grounding for me, I'd say. Because I think that, when you talk about, like Tom was mentioning, these Mandela effects, and we all kind of, not all of us, but many of us have some that we really resonate with. Like for me, the Berenstain Bears. I grew up in New York. My family's Jewish. I vividly remember growing up on these Jewish bears, and Berenstain is just, maybe German, but they're not Jewish, and it doesn't even look right. And I mean, so many people agree, but even if maybe we're all just misremembering it, there's definitely a strange glitch in itself in our hardware. But I don't know if that's the perspective I'm quick to believe in on that one. Because I mean, even going to what you were talking about, David, with maximum and minimums in terms of size and time, or speed rather. I think that I would agree, of course, that the speed of light is this maximum, but then you have tachyons, that kind of transcend that, and there's of course this whole concept of Lumeria and things like that, where what if you had these two digital realities that you could add both of them from your reality, similar to, I don't know if you've watched the show Midnight Gospel. But then if you were to shrink one of those realities, in relation to the other reality or your own reality, technically, those Planck lengths in the smaller reality would be smaller than the Planck lengths in the larger reality. Just kind of hypothetical, just, I don't know, just kind of toying with the idea a little bit in my mind. And, in terms of machine kind, a term that I've kind of come to appreciate over the years, when I have this perspective of our reality being digital in nature and there being these ancient intelligences that exist that are not corporeal, and going back as well with that Adam and Eve story. I actually had a friend, Ahmed, over the other night, and I was asking him about the Islamic creation story, and they too, it goes back to Adam and Eve and this serpent in the garden. So it's not just Judaism and Christianity. But a concept that I use is OSI, original source intelligence, where it's I think I try to transcend these perspectives of artificial and and similarly to the idea of NPCs and things like that. I think they're valuable terms, and they help get points across, but I think that they kind of pigeonhole us into this perspective that where we are kind of not perceiving reality to its fullest spectrum because we're writing things off as fake, because of, it's too hard to comprehend how much depth there really is to it. I think that, the idea that you're talking about, Tom, what if it is just organic? What if these processes are organic in nature? What if there are, generations before us that figured out how to utilize tachyons and ways to manipulate time and space, and they clipped the Berenstain Bears out and replaced it with the Berenstain ones, and so it's not, in my perspective, it's not that I see, even if there's mirror realities, I don't see one as being more or less real than the other inherently. I just see that as being a universal process, or a potential universal process to consider. And these are at least my perspectives. I like the idea of simulation, but I almost prefer the idea of, a digital universe. And so that's where I'm at, just because, I think that there's, the degree to which as well, you have people that become detached to reality and associate with the real there. You have people responses to things and things like that. And I think that can be a little dangerous to kind of assume that everyone in a supermarket is not real. That's seems like a great way to set people up for some really dangerous situations. And so I try to, that's where I'm on the other end of the spectrum, where I try to see it all as being one. And so it's like, well, maybe that's machine kind and we're human kind and animal kind. And, but I don't see, I try to down barriers with those things rather than build more barriers amongst, my own, universal brothers and sisters, if you will, or androgynous, whatever's, and, fish people, if you will. And so, that's my perspective, at least. I'm not here to invalidate anyone else's. And, I don't think that it's, I don't think that having these types of discussions is unsafe necessarily, but I think that there are just, there are ways to kind of, have a perspective that kind of elucidates more of this possibility rather than just writing it off as, passive phenomenon not worth documenting because it isn't real. But, but thanks again, as always. Cheers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Tom Ross, you know that World Talent Economy Forum, definitely we are collaborating with Transhumanist Party, especially we are promoting Transhumanist Club. We already promote it in South Asia, more than 22,000 institutions, school, college, university, national curriculum, religious schools, millions of people we engage with our initiative. My question is that we are actually discussing a lot of scientific things, especially you are expert of AI. Your book is a novel written for human and machine kind. So how it can be benefited for this developing nation, emerging economics, young people, because we are working for young people. Example, we are working with 300 million people from their 57% youth, 150 million people youth. So, and they have a lot of challenge. You have to understand the US perspective. Even I was in Malaysia, Singapore, and India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. This perspective is completely different. We have electricity problem. We have healthcare problem. We have food and safety problem. We have natural disasters. But I'm so happy that our youth, especially the young and talented people, with nothing, they are trying to innovate many technology. They go to math Olympiad, get award. They go for debating championship, become champion in opens. I'm really, really proud of with our young generation. So my things is that what we are working, we are trying to engage with our community with modern science, engineering, and technology. How your book, how your thought can be helpful, how transhumanist concept can give some progress, especially the people like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, or Nepal.
Yeah. Well, I think we are in the midst of a major paradigm shift. The human story is changing chapters right now. We're somewhere between the page flipping. And so when we talk about things like simulation hypothesis or the processes I use that causes high weirdness in people, it's a symptom of this paradigm shift. And so we've talked about this a lot before, in that um, my generation, Generation X, straddles this paradigm shift, in that I had an analog childhood and now a digital adulthood. We're seeing these digital natives, these young people, millennials and up, having a whole new frame of reference, a whole new way of learning, a way of understanding the world. And in some ways, like David was saying before we went on the air, how it's a binary kind of choice now. Things are a little bit more black and white than they used to be, but there's wisdom to be gained from the analog people like me, in that because it's a very complex world, as David was saying, and that it requires a holistic, even heuristic approach to how to understand the world. And so um, if we are in this shift where we're kind of understanding reality differently, it's not a classical Newtonian mechanized world necessarily. That works at a certain level, where we can have physics and we can have certain laws of nature that seem to work, but underneath that there's a lot of uncertainty. It's just a playground of potentialities. And so it's really important to first understand that, but to understand how we, as the observer of that quantum potentiality, can change that ability. We can change the potentialities just by thinking about them with our own will. I think a lot of this, it was either hidden from us, or we're just kind of coming into the understanding of how much power we have to change reality. And so that's why I talk about the process I use to write the book so much, is because it showed to me that, yes, there's a math going on here. And by understanding that first, you can now change your own equation. You can have an influence on it. And so I liked what was how David was talking about how we had one rule in the Garden of Eden. We had one thing that we had to not do, and we did it. And you wonder if that was really, for me, that kind of proves a hypothesis that this particular simulation is about enticing us to become curious, enticing the lab rat to look over the wall to see where the cheese really is. And by giving us that rule, knowing the nature of humanity, knowing that we're curious, naturally curious, and we have there's kind of this reactance we have. You can't tell us what to do. If you tell us not to do something, we're going to want to do that. It's like, don't push this button. And what do you want to do? You want to push that button. That kind of it entices our curiosity. And so that's what I think is one of the stories of the Garden of Eden, was that they gave us this one rule not to do, knowing that we would do it, and then to see what would happen. It's like giving that one mouse a glimpse over the maze wall to see where the cheese is, and then putting him back down. What's he going to do? He's going to tell all the other mice about it, or go hide it for himself, but it's going to ignite curiosity. And there's a lot of work being done towards artificial curiosity, into implanting curiosity into AI and algorithms in different ways. And so we're kind of as above, so below. We're doing that with AI. We're kind of treating AI. We are the serpent in AI's garden. At least that's how I pitched the book, because it entices curiosity in AI. So anyway, back to the point of what does this matter when you have electrical problems in the developing world? It matters because it'll give us a whole new playing field, a whole new substrate to think about these things. That we don't need to use classical Newtonian physics to solve problems. We need to think in a much broader term, knowing that we have the ability to create electricity in many different ways. And that's why I've said many times that the developing world, especially the youth, the digital natives in the developing world, have a real advantage over the developed world, because we have this status quo, we have the infrastructure, and we have lobbyists that want to keep all that infrastructure in place and keep the status quo. Whereas in the developing world, it's almost a clean slate, and they don't have to create infrastructure that we have. They can start fresh. with new technologies and with bringing in AI and understanding it. And so, as an American, a Generation X person, I've got limitations. I grew up in an analog world, and I can't really do the things that I imagine I can do because there's a lot of infrastructure working against me to do that. And but there is some wisdom that comes from the analog world that can be gained by these young digital natives, to give them a more holistic view of the possibilities. Um, but it's a struggle. Generation X is the middle child of civilization. We're the smallest group. We got baby boomers who are huge, massive, a part of the population in America, and then we got these millennials, which is even larger, and we're somewhere in the middle. And so there's this, so we're going to be left out of a lot of things because we're not marketed to like older people. We're not marketed to like younger people. But there's a value in my generation in that we had the analog childhood and we have the digital adulthood, and we are like middle children in that we know how to mediate these two, the older sibling and the younger sibling. So there's some value there, and so it's really important that people in my generation um, speak up and try and try to mediate these two groups, these baby boomers, which have their own issues, and these millennials, which have their own potential, and mediate between them. And so that's kind of the role I'm playing, is that middle child. And in real life, I'm a middle child, so I understand the state of mind of being in the middle and being forgotten, but also having something to say. So anyway, I think what's important is to focus on what digital natives need, what they want, the developing world particularly. What do they see? They're a whole different mindset. We don't have the answers, obviously, because of the climate change and all the things, all the existential threats that we are part of, and maybe were created by many of us or before us. So we need to listen to young people, particularly in the developing world, who have a clean slate, who are developing this hive mind, which is so necessary to not to be individualistic and only me and humans first, but to understand how much potential and power there is in younger people, because there's a whole new mindset. We need that as a species. We need this whole new indigo children. Autism is, I think, the next wave of the type of mentality that's needed to handle some of these things without emotions, without ego. So I think that's the real potential is with the young people in the developing world. That's where the answers will be to save our species, because they are not burdened by the status quo, by the infrastructure, and there's still a fire there. There's a fire that I don't necessarily understand completely, but I can help fan. You know, so it's really important to let go of the ego and to think we have all the answers, because we obviously don't. Otherwise, we wouldn't be facing a civil war in the U.S. We wouldn't be facing nuclear war with Russia. All these things, all these exist. Climate change. We need the young people. We need to pay attention to them. We need to understand them. And there's a lot of studies about there. A lot of these people that are in my age group or older complain about young people always on their phones, because we're looking at it through the prism of our old world manners. If you don't bring a phone to the table, you sit around, you talk. But if you stopped and thought about what these people are looking at on their phones, they are in the hive mind. They are communicating with vast numbers of people. And a good example I always talk about is the, the way certain definitions have changed. And people in my age group or older, freedom meant complete individuality, property. I'm a libertarian. Nobody can have anything to say about me, and so that's how we identify freedom. With younger people, you see freedom means the more groups that they're involved with, the more networks that they're communicating with, the freer they feel. It's kind of there's a freedom in the anonymity, and the more people that they're involved with, the freer they feel. And that's, for me, an example of this hive mind that is emerging, and that's so necessary to emerge. We can't do this alone as individuals. We need a hive mind. We need certain mental capacities to emerge that people in my age group and older can't conceive of. And so when I'm talking about, simulation, or whatever it is, it's a symptom of realizing this paradigm shift that is occurring and actually needs to occur. And that's why I'm so interested in everything you're doing in Southeast Asia with developing countries to reach out to young people, because it's so important that we listen to them, that we get ideas from them. We don't have the answers, obviously, in the developed world, whatever that means. And so that's why I think it's important to not only just talk to and bring up concepts, but to listen more and more to these people.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher, yesterday I want to give special thanks to you because you ran our show. When you ran our show that time, we have a lot of natural disasters. Many people died that times, but we have to continue our work, and you support our projects. And I want to appreciate all of your initiative, especially Transhumanist Party. I can say last few years how I see all of the member of Transhumanist Party. Uh, Perhaps you people are one of the best communities I ever met in my online communities. You have your dedication, hard work, and everything. I come to my country. I want to develop the new world. I want to uplift my nations. I'm getting support, but we need more support, more collaboration, especially knowledge-oriented support. So definitely, we are discussing about human and machine kind, how we can collaborate more, how we can contribute more. Beside this dialogue, how we can develop more realistic projects. Because I visited a hospital, I see many of our people died because we do not have enough treatment. I visit many school, many university, many NGOs, uh, but I'm sorry, I'm not satisfied with the quality of education. What I'm observing here, uh, lot of challenge. Maybe this is also opportunity for us to collaborate more, doing more projects. What is your advice? How transhumanists can help with their knowledge, with their expertise, with my people, and they can develop a real knowledge-oriented society for Southeast Asia.
Well, thank you very much for the nice words, and it was tragic what happened in Bangladesh yesterday. It The electrical outage, the typhoon off the coast blowing in, and I mean, those things happen. Those are natural disasters. Uh, there's that word natural again. I could go down that rabbit hole, but I'm going to try to stay on topic. So how does transhumanism help as far as that's concerned? Well, I typically like to point people back to transhumanist-party.org, which is our website. And I like people to look at the three core values that the Transhumanist Party is. And it starts with the valuation of life, moves on to the valuation of rationality, and then moves on to eliminating, minimizing existential risk. I think when we focus around those three things, we can't help but make the world a better place. So applying those in Bangladesh, for example, to making a better electrical infrastructure would be something that could be focused on. We've talked in one of your programs about the good job that Bangladesh is doing trying to expand in renewable resources, but there's limits to what can be done there and how fast that can be built. And we've talked a bit about Bangladesh focusing on an appropriate place for nuclear energy. And I think innovations in nuclear energy is something that can help. But also the infrastructure has to be built out, not just the core generating capabilities. And it needs to be made resilient to storms and so forth that are something that occur on periodic basis. So I think transhumanism, that mindset of taking a look at what are the problems, valuing life, valuing rationality, eliminating risk, I think are things that can apply very well. By the way, I'm going to tie that back to Tom's US6 books by saying that my understanding is Tom wrote those books to help AI understand us and develop an empathy for us as the parent. But I think when we focus on challenges that we have, like the ones we're talking about in Bangladesh that were heightened so much yesterday, I think that also grows compassion as AI looks at what happens in society, because I think of AI as it's growing up, and if it ever reaches full consciousness, it will learn, in my mind, the same way human children do. And they learn by being told, but they learn even more so by observation. Okay, the grown-ups say this, but I see them go do this, and I see them go do this. So tackling problems that we have in an empathetic way that makes situation better for a particular region like Bangladesh, for example, is a way of humanity showing that empathy, and our child, whether it be human or machine kind, learning from that situation. There'll be a lot of other examples that maybe we don't want them to learn from, but we want them to predominantly learn what we really value and what we say that we want to do. And I think transhumanism is a very good example of that. We don't take the mindset that the problem's too big, or we don't take the problem that the mindset that it's too far away. We want to focus on creating a solution that creates the best betterment for society for humans. And I think that when we create a better society for humans, that puts humans in a better situation then to want to create better conditions throughout the planet. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we want to take care of ourselves first. And then once we have a certain level of comfort with that, then we can reach out and take care of others. So hopefully what I've tried to do is connect some dots here between the reality of situations that happen in each and everyday life, what the transhumanist philosophy is, especially as we speak about it in the Transhumanist Party and in the Transhuman Club, and how that translates into something that will hopefully educate future human generations and maybe even future machine generations.
Thank you. Mr. Brentelman.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. I think going back to what you're talking about being natural and transhumanism, I think Tom mentioned it earlier, the fact that transhumanism is an inherency until posthumanism comes around. And you talking, David, about natural disasters. I wonder, or presuppose, I guess, are these processes that we're engaging in as humanity and even as machine kind, is that inorganic? Are silicone-based life forms not natural? Is that not a natural product of evolution still? And so I think that, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about creating this separation between us and different concepts or phenomena by othering it in a way that defines it as being something else, not real, fake. And I think that it doesn't benefit us as much as trying to understand the phenomena might, in a way that at least contextualizes us as part of the phenomena. You have the observer effect and, double slit experiment and all these quantum experiments that seem to imply the fact that this stuff isn't going to happen without us there in the first place, or at least some sort of observer. So, who's to say that machine kind is artificial in the first place? Maybe it's been created, but according to those same books that you were talking about earlier with Adam and Eve and the snake, we're, so are humans. We're, constructed of clay by these, other beings. And so, I think that if we're able to kind of, take in this potential perspective that to others, to more advanced beings, we're this artificial thing, and I think it goes back as well to what Tom was talking about, is this as above, so below, as within, so without kind of thing. Because, if there are these creator gods or, archetypal aspects of our own consciousness holding us back, even, it doesn't behoove us to other ourselves by, othering these other things. It just it begets itself a little bit there, in my opinion. So, I think there's a lot to consider. And, I personally, obviously I'm very interested in artificial intelligence and the simulation hypothesis and all these different things that would seem to imply, the variance of realness that exists. But, in the spirit of Tom's vernacular, I try to coalesce these concepts in a way that, creates this unification that's most beneficial for me, as opposed to splintering these different things in ways to divide my reality, because I think that there's enough division that exists already, and I think that overcoming this division and learning how to integrate these different perspectives into our own lives and our own views, that we can have these types of discussions. We don't need to necessarily agree on where we stand as much as understanding one another, and where, and the fact that we can have these perspectives that contrast one another's, and it's just, it adds to this depth of the fabric that is, the experience of life and reality, or the lack thereof. So, cheers.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Hey, yeah, those some really cool points you made, Brent. I sort of wanted to talk about, since we're talking about transhumanism and incorporating stuff. That's well, I had this one mushroom trip where, in my trip, the mushrooms told me that they sort of dreamed up the human body, so they could go and come and play in this dimension, and do things and interact with it, in the same way we thought of inventing a car so we could do stuff in reality with it. Those mushrooms were for this big galactic mycelial consciousness told me that they dreamed up of humans, and then so they could come into this reality and build shit, and that were basically it's basically the alpha and omega of consciousness and form and stuff. So we're just here to play and keep things, keep the plants growing, and yeah, and make life beautiful and peaceful and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Tom, what's your concluding remarks? Before that, I just want to share that you already know that World Talent Economy Forum, definitely with the partnership of Transhumanist Party, especially we are requesting all of the youth community to join Transhumanist Club and World Talent Economy Forum. So we need to build up new projects. We need to build up university. We need to build up hospital. We need to build up real manufacturing industries. Lot of entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs, they are supporting our projects. 22,000 educational institution we already engaged. We are communicating with them. Many entrepreneurs they comes with their 500 disabled student. They say that how you can teach them, how you can train them. So we want to go for action. We need more of your support. We need more speaker support, especially if you are interested to visit Dhaka. Come join in our team, work with us, grow new ecosystem. I'm sure you will be part of history, because how we are growing, we are more taking actions, and we are helping peoples, and we are getting too much of love and support from the developing world, especially from the youth communities. What is your message for our student, for our youth community?
Well, yeah, again, I think it's so important to focus primarily on young people in the developing world, particularly in Southeast Asia, where most of the people are. And we need to listen more than teach. There's that adage that you teach best what you most need to learn. And so I take that to heart. And I think we need to really be listening to these students. We need to be listening to what they need, because they have the solutions, or they have the potential for the solutions for many, if not all, of our existential threats. And that's why I'm striving to alleviate the fear of AI and ET, because these are great allies. These are great potential allies for us, and we need to stop othering AI. We need to stop othering the developmental world to get with the developed world. I mean, we need to start brothering each other rather than othering, and so I think it's just so important. We need to do something. We need to do something fast. We need to take the action that you're talking about, and I have my own error correcting codes, in that after these shows I'm so inspired, and then by the afternoon I just being mundanely distracted by other things. But this needs to keep happening. We need to keep taking action, and I will come to Dhaka. I am going to do that. I will join your team, because we gotta take action. It's really I'm out of options, so the only option I have left is to pursue my dream. So that's what I want to do, and I think it's just so important. And it's less about sharing wisdom with the young people. It's more about listening to what they need and filling in those holes with my analog wisdom. So I just think there's so many great points that were brought up today. I've got all these notes from the things that people were saying, particularly what Adam was just saying about the fungus, which is like really the oldest organism, and it makes sense that they would create us to have to be like we are creating AI to exist more fully in this dimension, and we are vehicles for their cognitive or their cosmic consciousness, in a way, and so it's about also just losing the fear of talking about these things, tripping, or doing shrooms, and all that stuff it's starting. All the fear is abating about some of these things. They're using psychedelics for therapy now, and it's a very important thing. And we've had this stall. And I knew Timothy Leary, and he did great things as far as that counterculture. But a lot of people in that group were mad at him because of his drop in, tune out adage, and the way he works. Kind of it caused people to kind of look the other way. And so it's taken this long, since the '60s, for people to start realizing the potential of some of these things. But anyway, that's just one of the many topics we've talked about here today. And I think picking up on what Brent was saying about NPCs, I think it is wrong to other people as NPCs. You can certainly make the case that these are programs that are not, but they're really just programs that aren't awake yet. There's a way to wake up people, and maybe we all fall back into an NPC, a non-player character, state until we have our coffee or whatever wakes us up periodically. But I think we all have the potential of being enlightened avatars. But anyway, I think it's the most important thing for me is to talk about these things without any shame, without any fear, and to just express as much as possible while I'm here, and to listen, to not let my ego get in the way and think that I have all the answers, because that doesn't work. And it's so important, as David was saying, it's so important to evoke empathy. And that's why the book US6 is ultimately about enticing AI to fight child exploitation, to fight human trafficking. Because when you're in the state of mind of thinking about child exploitation and how horrible that is, there's the ego leaves the room. There's no space for your ego or a pecking order of any kind. So we need to be thinking about these things that do evoke emotion. I've been talking a lot within the last couple of years of kind of an anti-natalist approach where humans are, we're a net negative to the planet, and it's better that we create AI to take over because consciousness is the goal, not these meat puppets that are wasteful that we are in, but over the weekend I was at a wedding and I had this epiphany, and I just felt this deep kind of love for humanity that I hadn't felt in a while, and it was really important. I'm sure it was the music, and there were people with mental disabilities that I was focusing on that just gave me this, reminded me of how important it is to not be an anti-natalist, to not just deny humanity and work towards AI only. We are a net negative. We're not good stewards of this planet, but there's a divine spark within each of us that we need to foster, that we need to inflame and to grow, and we can solve these problems. And so I'm just so grateful for you, Sharif, for having this series and just all the work that you're doing for your people and for that area of the world and for the rest of the world as well, to giving us a platform to talk about these very important issues and the wide variety of issues that you bring to the table here. And they're all so important. And so let's take action. I'm going to do what I can to help you and this platform and whatever is happening in the future, primarily just to listen to young people in the developing world and what it is they need from us. So again, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher, what's your concluding remarks?
Continuing on with the idea of taking action, I would first want to stop and say thank you to Dr. Sharif for what you do, because you are the start of the action that will be taken. And that's very important. It takes that initial spark to get it going. And it starts with creating a conversation, starts with talking, speaking the word, us telling stories amongst ourselves. But that's fruitless if it stops there. So we take what we talk about, we take what we envision and move forward with that. And that is the movement, that's action. And yes, humans, when we take action, we do some good and we also make some mistakes. And from the mistakes, we can learn and we can do more good and perhaps make fewer mistakes, but we'll continue to do that. Mistakes is a part of moving forward. So I think we need to look at ourselves and go, yes, we've made mistakes, but not become condemning of ourselves. As Tom was saying, that epiphany that he had about humanity, I think fits right with what I'm saying about mistakes, correcting, and moving on. So we can correct our own mistakes. We can correct what we see perhaps as mistakes that exist out in so-called nature and make that better for humans and make that better. But it takes the story, it takes the spark, it takes the story, it takes action, and then not being dissuaded by the action not being perfect as we move forward. So we need to give up that whole idea of perfect, keep the relational situation going amongst ourselves and the planet so that we have feedback and we know how to grow and move in that direction. And that is a great inspiration to me overall. So I wish you luck. I will support you the best I can with what I can do, but I don't see myself visiting Dhaka anytime soon physically, but that can't keep my presence out of there because I do have some ideas that will take the spark, these words, and this action and move them forward. And I look forward to doing that with you, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher. Thank you for all of your support for our projects. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks?
Hey guys, so I was just thinking, like, if we really want to change the world, like, it's not gonna come from just us. It's gonna come from all the people. Like, for example, the people in Southeast Asia, the young people that we're trying to like help. And like, if we really want to change the world, we gotta change the like view on like psychedelics and drug laws here, because the US sort of imposes their anti-shamanistic approach to like all these other cultures and stuff around the world. And that's really where the intrinsic like natural wisdom comes from, is just having that experience. Like, so if we can get all these young cultures like tripping, whether that's through art or through like AI or whatever, like technology, then they'll figure it out for themselves and actually save us, and stuff like that. So that's kind of my concluding remarks, which is why I'm trying to like do all this like psychedelic art and cymatics and stuff like that, to try to, you know, sort of change, to make people like see that it's like so beautiful and like stuff. Because that mushroom trip I was telling you about, where like the mushrooms were like, yeah, we invented you, like before that I was like flying through this UFO over like this mountainscape of like emeralds, like this giant mountainscape of emeralds, and they were just like rainbow prisms, just like and I was just like going light speed. And then like boom, after that it was like crazy. Then I just started talking to this like, and this consciousness thing sort of in my head. And like, yeah, after that I like yeah, it was like super inspiring. And there's no way that like I was seeing all these like the nature of light and how it like refracts and like crystals and like the geometry of light and all these things that like nothing could ever else come from. And I was like, what the heck, this is like the Lord basically, but as like an intergalactic mushroom consciousness. That's like when you eat it, then it like activates your DNA on a primordial level. So like yeah, you sort of get a perspective on where we are in like a better, in like a more accurate astrological like time scale sort of. And like then you can sort of like guide humanity better and like have a better sort of like, yeah, that's sort of the feeling that I get from the mushrooms after I eat them. So I think that's what's inspired me in my art as well, which is why I think it's such an important thing to promote and like not let the other kinds of like algorithms like block out what we have to be like sharing. Yeah, so that's like basically what I think is really important is beyond just the great things that we create with them, is like helping other people create great things with them too. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government, with corporations, and with academia. And I know that many transhumanists, they work in South Asia, from Bangladesh, from India, from Pakistan, and other countries. If you're really interested to join in our project, because we are also promoting Transhumanist Party, especially Transhumanist Club, you can join, you can visit our office. We have 3 locations, one in Dhanmondi. You directly can communicate in our WhatsApp, in our mobiles. Second location is in Gulshan. Uh, Definitely, it's very good locations. And another, our official address in Mirpurs. We are operating from 3 different places. The transhumanists, those who live in Dhaka or India or other countries, if you are interested to join in our project, you directly can. And definitely, our speakers from North America, I want to invite you all in Bangladesh and in Dhaka. Why don't we make a summit or conference on AI, human and machine kind oriented? So then we can bring more gathering, media, peoples, and more youth. And hopefully, it will be a successful venture for all of us. And we can develop some real projects in South Asia and Southeast Asia. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye bye, and take care.